this headline. Marco Rubio, quote, no evidence Trump tax cuts help U.S. workers. Unless you think the headline is misleading, let's go to the article. Senator Marco Rubio told The Economist in a recent interview that there was, quote, no evidence whatsoever that the large tax cuts President Donald Trump gave businesses are helping average Americans. Quote, there is still a lot of thinking on the right that if big corporations are happy, they're going to take the money they're saving and reinvest it in American workers. In fact, they bought back shares. A few gave out bonuses. There's no evidence whatsoever that the money's been massively poured back into the American worker, unquote. Rubio also said that the government has an important role to play in the current American economy. Quote, if we basically say everyone is on their own and the market's going to take care of it, we will rip the country apart because millions of good, hard-working people lack the means to adapt. Again, that's not hashtag resistance. That's not Nancy Pelosi. That's not Rachel Maddow. That's the chosen one. That's right, the one that when good friend Daniel Horowitz and I were trying to work to get Ted Cruz the Republican nomination, our conservative friends that went to Marco Rubio instead, they did so because they told us. I mean, Marco would make sure we were on message. Marco would make sure to sell our principles to a new audience that Ted Cruz, with his rigid conservatism, could never reach. Well, Rubio is certainly selling something now. It's the 2018 midterm election Democrat get out the vote talking points. And just as I warned Todd a couple days ago, it won't change. The White House Correspondents' Dinner should have been the electoral paradigm shift our buddy Bob Vanderplaats forecasted in the chair next to me on Monday. And the reason I said that it wouldn't, because this Republican Party is either unwilling or incapable of taking such a gift and hammering it home. And already, you can see, Marco Rubio took the lone legislative accomplishment that the Republican Congress has had and will have for 2 years. Their lone legislative accomplishment, and just dropped a deuce on its face. Let's discuss. Let's bring back Daniel Horowitz from Conservative Review for our roundtable. Now that I have teed it up for you, Daniel, commence au festival. The floor is yours.
Well, look, Steve, you know, this is why I said at the time during the presidential election that I was never Marco. I made that very clear, by the way, that if he were to win the nomination, I wouldn't vote for him in the general election. To me, it wasn't never Trump. It was I was never Rhino. I was just done with these people. And I made it clear at the time it wasn't just over immigration. What did we just talk about, Steve? How when it comes to the consummate issues of our time, it's not just that they help the other side. It's that they adopt the underlying philosophy of the left on every issue. So Marco Rubio would have you believe that when you actually lessen the tax burden on corporations, it doesn't have an economic effect. But somehow when you give handouts, which he actually succeeded in putting in the tax bill, doubling refundable tax credits for people who have a net zero tax liability, or sometimes a net negative tax liability, that's really good for the economy. You and I both know there's a lot of cronyism with corporations, but I don't see him going after that on healthcare, on on ethanol, that's like exactly right. Ted did in Iowa.
He has never at any point in his career I'm aware of been any sort of opponent to any crony capitalist venture of any magnitude whatsoever. Never.
And even the Democrats aren't saying that. They were saying it's crumbs. They had to admit, because that's exactly what's happening. You know, you and I both know, even if you don't give an official bonus back to the workers, the productivity that you have in terms of cheaper goods and services, in terms of more job creation, got to come out of it. The same way if you increase taxes, it will lessen the growth factor. I mean, everyone knows that. But here it actually blatantly resulted in bonuses. It's unbelievable. What Marco is basically saying is that it only helps people if you directly rob from others and give handouts rather than merely giving people back their own money. That is not just a side debate. That is the crux of the Democrat economic argument on every fiscal issue.
I went back and looked at this. As of January 18th, earlier this year, 164 companies gave bonuses or lowered their fees to customers as a result of the Trump tax cuts. 164 companies. And with Republicans besieged everywhere, from the president's approval actually is now higher than Nancy Pelosi's. But still, it's in a danger zone. It's well sub 50%. They're upside down on every issue. As you pointed out, Daniel pointed this out in an article, a must-read article for our site last week. Voters are now seeing Republicans as the swamp in the most internals of polling, which everybody hates across the country. They're getting destroyed in special elections. They are looking for wins, and they have one right here. And lo and behold, the chosen one, the Smart Set's favorite elected official, is out there telling the ultra-liberal economist that essentially you're right, we're wrong, and we should have continued doing this Obama's way, even though we already have more economic growth early on under Trump than we ever had in 8 years under Obama. Todd, this is where you will now recognize my rightness. You will now agree with what I have been saying. They don't want to win. They're trying to lose. No one's this dumb on purpose. And I just want to say up front, thank you. I appreciate you doing this.
It can be a both and. It's May, and the they you're talking about is not the. There's no. These are like the polling that when you have the nameless, faceless Republican polling and how that goes, or Democrat, vice versa. All politics is local when it comes down to this, and whatever happens in November. But as you know, yeah, I'd be happy to see Marco Rubio's scalp, but I think you might be a little too hard on him. I mean, he is the greatest third-place finisher ever in the Iowa caucuses, and he stuck around in Florida, remember, just so his mom would be proud and see his name on that ballot. So come on, give him a little wiggle room on this. I think Marco Rubio. Steve, you talk a lot about how smelling the sulfur when you go to see and what Washington does to people. Washington didn't do anything to Marco Rubio. Most of the guys, this is who they were at the outset. When he was celebrated as the great Cuban hope when he came to the Senate in the first place, he was lying to you. And it's pretty clear that this guy is all that Daniel said in terms of his reasoning for not voting for him. He is an utter facade. He is the poster child for the fake conservative movement that all of us have been drinking from a fire hose for how many decades now? He should not be allowed to get away with this. Don't let him do a turnaround. Don't do him any sort of mea culpa. How many strikes does this guy have now, Steve? The Gang of Eight just obviously being the tip of the iceberg. But let's bury him once and for all. Put him. Talk about him just like we talk about Mitch McConnell. He is no friend of ours. We should know, as Aragorn says in Helm's Deep, offer him no mercy because they will offer none in return.
Aaron, it's one thing if he wanted to say, hey, they were a good first step. We didn't go far enough. We need to understand that, people see us as the party of corporate America, and we need to do more to put more money back in the pockets of everyday Americans. That's not what he said. He took his party's only accomplishment, only one, and just defecated on it. And here's something worth noting as well. I promise you that if Ted Cruz had done this, or Mike Lee, or Rand Paul, or Jim Jordan, or Steve King, or Mark Meadows, if they'd have done this, what the entire fake conservative media smart set would be doing to them today would is banned in most prison showers. What they would do to them today, they would be disemboweling them as we speak. Purists, nothing's ever good enough. No wonder we never win. Would that not be happening right now?
It would certainly be.
And I'm going to guarantee you 99.999% of our audience watching right now is hearing this story for the first time right now. Because those same people, nothing. Silent. When their chosen one takes any glimmer of hope, optimism, momentum, they try to mount for 2018 and just flushes it down a toilet and says, here's the speaker's gavel, Nancy. Your thoughts, Aaron?
Yeah, no, that's the game. That is the game. It's either my guys, my chosen ones, against whoever, or nothing at all. And that's the game that it seems like the fake, phony conservative movement plays. It is interesting to me where and I think I find it analogous when we have situations like these with Marco Rubio's comments. It's kind of like the apology tour that Barack. I think it comes from the same source that the apology tour that Barack Obama went on when he was first elected president, because he's just so virtuous. He's so honest about America that we need to apologize for some of the things that we've done wrong. We need to get the things that we've done wrong. We need to right those, and we just want to know that we're self-aware now, and we need to apologize for those things. It's the same motivation with all of these guys. We're just trying to keep our side accountable, because that's just how virtuous and good we are, and that's all Marco's trying to do. Let's just be honest here. That the tax cuts were not that big. That is the same fake, fraudulent sense of virtue that these charlatans peddle every single day. And we see it more and more around the elections as well. It is just this sense of, and with Marco Rubio, he looks pretty, he looks good up there. That's my quarterback up there. He sounds good. He's really articulate. I've said this multiple times during the Iowa caucuses. He gave one of the best defenses of the pro-life argument ever. One of the best that I've ever heard in a hostile, from a hostile questioner. So he's got all those things down. But when you come down to it, he's no different than any of the progressives, I think, that we watch and we cover day in and day out.
And the thing is, I've heard Rubio on more than one occasion, I agree with Aaron, give insanely eloquent defenses of the sanctity of life. Unfortunately, though, when you do stuff like this, Daniel, and you just hand Democrats their entire campaign messaging for the election in a few months, it doesn't really matter what your pro-life stance is, because you will get no chance to act on it when they're in control of Congress, the Planned Parenthood Party is, right away. This is the point we're trying to make here. And Daniel, I'm sure you'll join me in throwing out thoughts and prayers to Republican congressional incumbents that are going to be on a debate stage this fall, having that quote thrown right at them, right in their faces from the moderator. I want to throw thoughts and prayers out there to every Republican incumbent running in a swing district this October when they face that quote from Marco Rubio right in their faces.
I mean, our guys are always good at tossing interceptions for the other side. That's their pastime. And again, I want to look at this more fundamentally. It's not just this issue. It's not just a gag. It's the underlying philosophy that he always adopts the other side's philosophy. This is the fatal flaw of the conservative movement. It doesn't exist. They don't have their own affirmative beliefs. Mm-hmm. They look at everything through the prism of what the left is doing, and they react to it. And eventually what starts to happen is they wear you down, and you start entertaining their arguments. Okay, well, how do I implement their philosophy in a little different way, seem compassionate, rather than say, what the heck, you guys caused this, you guys did this on immigration, you guys did this on healthcare. No, and you know what's so tragic here? What are the two issues where Republicans have always remained strong?
Tax cuts is like the lowest lying fruit of the entire Republican Party.
And what else?
Pro-life?
No, see, I disagree on that because they've done guns.
Yeah, it's guns. Yeah.
Those two issues, Marco's now thrown overboard, and he thinks to work back. And then the other important trend going on in conservatism now, it always used to be a fake retrospective movement. So the left would get into power like a socialist ratchet. It's only one direction. They'd move us to the left, more dependency, more big government. And then our side would work only within their contours over what they're willing to roll back. We're done with that. They're not going to roll back anything. Now it's prospectively, Bernie Sanders will come up with a new future entitlement that we don't have to deal with, that's not even popular, that nobody is clamoring for it outside of a couple of zip codes. But then the Republican smarts that will say, okay, how do we implement that idea that we don't have to deal with on top of all the other big government garbage and implement it in a different way? Where's Marco doing this now? On Ivanka Care, a new entitlement for paid leave and I guess babysitting and things like that. Unfortunately, some others are throwing in with that as well. So the point is, Marco Rubio is the embodiment of what's wrong with the Republican Party, and I'd say even more, the conservative movement.
Daniel, thank you for joining us this week again on CRTV. Good to see you, brother.
Take care.
Well, let us know what you think about what we think. Steve@stevedeace.com is the email address. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. Don't forget the podcast.